Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be. And hello in the comments to everyone that's already here. It seems that, and Bruce has already pointed out before we started, that today is Google Plus Death Day. And it seems like all the integrated other stuff is busy falling apart. So if this all goes horribly wrong, I'm awfully sorry. But then if you're here regularly, you'll be used to that sort of a thing. So good evening, gentlemen, or good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I hope you're all well. Let's dive straight in with Jonathan. Jonathan, you foolishly sent me a link to a course that you are putting together, and it's about, and I'm going to read it, airspace and charts, reading an airspace. I can't read what I wrote. An airspace and charts, reading good. It's something I wrote here. It's something I wrote down here. But what I will say is better than what I've tried to read out there. It's really good, and I'm very, very impressed. But we can't let the world see it because you haven't actually released it yet.
Correct.
Oh, I've forgotten. You just got online answers, aren't you? I've forgotten.
Yeah, no. So it's in beta right now. So I have about 100 plus beta testers going through it. We're going to wrap it up here hopefully really soon, and then I'll release that to the public. It's about 40 plus videos, over 100 quiz questions going through all sorts of different things, such as national security areas, military training routes. How do you find those? Sometimes they go active. The different websites, how to do a pre-flight, how to find lat and long, all these different things out there, the national security flight restrictions that are only on one website. And actually the reason why I started doing this is, one, people need some reliable information to prep for the remote pilot certificate, but additionally, people are kind of frustrated as to figure out, like, how in the world do you like pre-flight plan for an operation? Because the FAA puts out a lot of information, but with too much information, you like choke to death on all the information. There's multiple websites with multiple kind of overlapping things, but then all the websites don't display all the information. So you have to go to multiple websites to find some information. It's not just all conveniently in one place, which became kind of problematic. And so one real good story behind a lot of this is I had an individual I chatted with. They made a good faith effort to try to do some pre-flight planning. And what ended up happening was they relied on some information from what you would think to be a reliable source. It was not me. It was another entity. And basically what ended up happening is they flew somewhere they were not supposed to be. They weren't being malicious. They flew there after trying to do a good faith effort to try to, with limited amounts of aviation knowledge. And they ended up getting in trouble. And people with badges came after them, let's say. And so it got a little gnarly. So I was like, what? So there's a need there to try to actually identify, places to fly. Since actually the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 actually criminalized some certain types of flying. So for instance, you fly near a wildfire, right? That's a criminal activity. And so disrupting law enforcement efforts, emergency response, wildfire efforts, though that's I believe up to 1 year in federal prison and or fine. Additionally, if you are caught intentionally interfering with an aircraft with one or more people on board, which would make it manned, right? One or more people, then that's actually a criminal offense. And you fly in a runway exclusion zone, which is about 1 nautical mile off the end of the runway with about a half a nautical mile in width. If you do that, that's also a crime. And if around without authorization off the end of the runway of the active runway of a Bravo, Charlie, or Delta airport here in the United States, and if you injure somebody or someone's killed when that's actually going down, that's actually punishable up to life in prison. So,
gosh,
did I scare everybody?
yeah. On that light-hearted note,
Jonathan, a quick question. Wasn't there, in the old days of aviation, reputable Jefferson charts that everybody would use? What happened to those guys?
Well, you could use the sectional charts, but the sectional charts, the Jefferson charts, the sectional charts that are published by the FAA, you can access the sectional charts online. It's in a PDF format. The sectional charts cover all the United States, but there's also terminal area charts, which are about twice the resolution as the sectional charts. You can use those, but those are only for major airports, Atlanta, Miami, Orlando, New York, Philadelphia, and so that's helpful for those. But even then, it's hard to find where you are particularly like kind of flying in, because you can't get that really great in resolution. You can pull in lat long, and it's kind of annoying. Well, the FAA created this ArcGIS powered map, and that's actually pretty great because you can actually go in there and pull it up and actually type in your street address to find out if you're in Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or Echo at the surface airspace. And it also shows the flight restrictions that are drone specific. So the FAA, about 2 years ago, they created these flight restrictions, these Section 99.7 security related flight restrictions all over the US. And there's like 1,000 plus of these all over. And they don't show up on sectional charts whatsoever. They only show up on this one map, or unless you go download the KML files and throw them into Google Earth. That's the only way you'll ever find those. And they're all over Department of Interior, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Justice, like prisons, detention facilities, all over the U.S. And so you have to check for those as well. So, and then, as part of proper pre-flight planning, you check the chart bulletins to see if anything's been updated and check the NOTAMs. But then the FAA is actually not going to be probably continuing Pilot Web at some time in the future. They've actually upgraded to a new system called NOTAM Search. So there's a lot of stuff when it comes to pre-flighting that's even more confusing. Or even notice the airman publications. Yeah, like that. How many people even heard of NTAP? And then furthermore, as of February the 28th, they're no longer including FDC NOTAMs in the NTAP. Does anybody know that? I never knew that. I found a crowd. I was like, what the heck? When did this happen? So, then I as I figured that out, I was like, look, if I don't know this, everybody's goofed. So
it's a modern world we live in, and in our comments we have Blue Flyer who's asking about INAV and F405 and F722s, and he works at, I think and he can correct me if I'm wrong, number 1 AIDU, or it used to be called that back in the day, and they make charts in the UK. He works in the military chart making place. So if you're in the UK, there's someone that works here is in the comments, so that's fantastic. Looking for a flight controller for a larger model, then get yourself, well, it depends what it's called, but get a Cube if it's or Louis will have some opinions on that as well, but we'll come back to that in a minute. But let's go wander back towards Jonathan in a casual manner. Aviation information is at a bit of a crossroads, isn't it? Because there's traditional ways of getting it out there. Of course, the charts would always be right. I always love receiving my charts when I was doing the flying thing, just because it was a thing I wondered to sit and look at them and marvel at the changes and just if you're enough of a nerd. But of course, many people aren't coming into our world from that nerdy liking of charts. So is this where the course is aimed, or if I'm flying, is it going to help me keep up to date with what I'm doing?
The course was designed to bring someone who knows very little about aviation up to speed as to how to read the FAA related charts material that the FAA publishes, so as to fly in a confident manner, so they don't have to worry about the FAA or the cops or somebody, getting them when they're flying someplace they shouldn't, or they could fly in some location knowing that they have the proper paperwork and they're not going to get ambushed on the back end. So that was the whole idea, because there's just a lot of information out there, and it's complicated.
But yeah, and to Louis' point, sorry, I want to come back to your point, Louis. There are lots of apps in the drone world that have pretty inaccurate information on them, and they've not sourced their information from any of these grown-up places in the first place. So it is a bit of a worry, isn't it?
The unnamed individual that talked to me was using a app. So yeah, that then encountered law enforcement. So yeah, so there's, I mean, at the end of the day, how reliable? Yes.
Jonathan, let me interrupt you. How did the law enforcement knew the current regulations? Because law enforcement will have the same problem that the user will have. How do they know?
Oh, they knew. I can't go into it. It wasn't one of the. Okay, so yeah, you bring up actually an excellent point. Okay, because you're right. You're getting into this point of how you have these law enforcement individuals that are trying to regulate the airspace that somehow think that they're birds with a GPS signal, where they can actually pull the lat long to, like, centimeter level accuracy that you are flying in controlled airspace. I know of those situations that have happened, right? So there are ways. It is beneficial to find out, hey, where is that fine line of actually at street level accuracy using the FAA UAS data map. That's actually very helpful because there are times where you need to get a job done, and this side of the street is legit. On that side of the street, you're gonna have to go get a COA to operate there. So that situation I was referencing wasn't a gray zone. That was like, that wasn't a gray area.
It was a very white and black. But the issue remains: how will the law enforcement first? Who is going to enforce it? And second, how do they know?
Okay, well, the runway exclusion zone. That's
easy.
Well, that one's pretty. I mean, that one's pretty simple. It's a dimension right there. Active runway, Bravo Charlie Delta Airport, and then 1 nautical mile off, and it's a half a nautical mile wide, and then it's without authorization. You operate there. If you operate there with authorization, that's not an issue. So that's one issue that you can kind of resolve with the proper pre-flight planning and obtaining the proper approvals from the FAA, as well as documentation, and especially if you're operating under some type of Lance, USS setup, right? You're going to want to have documentation on that you can readily provide to law enforcement if they're savvy on that. So I mean, but then also at the same time, there's pre-flight planning in regards to like how are you dressing? Are you dressing like some professional that's running around that looks like a problem, right? I mean, as opposed to like a dude wearing his like hard hat with a yellow reflector vest, right? Because cop rolls up on that, he's going to be like, this guy probably might want to, he looks legit. He probably is not a troublemaker versus, the hat sideways and tats and cigarette and, that look, that like problem, like guy drunk,
Well,
and then the Bad Boys theme plays and, then there's the cameraman running, he's over there.
Oh, so America really is exactly like all the television series we see then. I mean, you're painting a picture that is exactly what we see on TV.
Put the drone on the ground. Show me your hand.
So if ever I visit, I must just listen for that music if I ever visit America. Rybat in the comments is saying that he started the latest airspace training. So far, it's very detailed and up to date, concise, excellent. And I have to agree, I enjoyed it very much as well. I'm going to hit go on that video I made today, even though I didn't realize that it's only in beta. But it's very good, Jonathan. It's very good.
Oh, thank you.
Issue is. How much do we have to be proficient on airspace management to do? Yeah, because
right now we have to be we have to know it. We have to know it. But moving forward, there should be no need at all to know any of this nonsense. It should go away. It should all be another world that we
now. What happens is that people are raising, authorities are raising the barrier to entry, and that will make people conveniently forget about some of the basic rules. So I think, okay, we know for a car what we need to do, and there are 10 rules that are basic to operate a motor vehicle on the roads. If we go beyond that to operate a drone, I'm not saying it is an airplane, because airplanes are a different story. You have years of training to operate an airplane. You cannot ask years of training for a drone operator. So where's the needle between nothing whatsoever to full pilot certification?
I think it's where the money is that's coming in. Well, we're going to talk about Australia and America in a minute. The Australian regs in a minute, and that is to my mind is money coming into it. And they, Google and Amazon, don't want us to have to care about airspace regulations. They just want to buy the first 2,000 feet and operate in it as they will. Everything else get out of the way. Have I jumped ahead? Bruce, stop me, Bruce, stop me.
I'd never stop you, Gary. You do such a wonderful job. But you're right. Australia is following in the footsteps of other countries and requiring compulsory registration of not only drones, but model aircraft. And this is crazy because CASA, like most other aviation regulators, has acknowledged on many occasions that the hobby is a safe hobby. It's a very safe hobby. It hasn't caused any issues with manned aviation in the past. And so why are we being lumped in with the rogue drone operators? It's simply because we can be. And it's becoming a tax. It's becoming a tax on the modeler. People like myself who've been flying models for months now, we are going to be penalised. But you know that the rogue drone operators who they're probably not even going to register. So we're paying fines for their bad behaviour, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. And the really interesting thing that's come out of this is that obviously, as appears to be the case in New Zealand now, the regulator is being bullied by politicians. They've been given a brief to come up with regulations that have to fit that brief. So really, CASA and in New Zealand, CAA have no choice but to do what they're told. And if you're going to set up an organisation to regulate and maintain the safety of a particular facet of human involvement, you cannot then dictate to them what to do, because they're the experts. You've set them up to do this job. So when politicians, which basically they're babies that have been dropped on their head, so they're qualified to become a politician, when they go into this role, they are telling people who know much more than them how to do their job. It's just not right. So in Australia, they did the consultation process, and I pointed people to the CASA website to fill out the consultation form, but this was consultation after the regulations were already made up. It's basically they were hoping for endorsement, but they didn't get it, so they just went ahead anyway. So, and the situation's a little bit unclear in Australia. I read a number of media reports that were saying it's going to be $20 per drone to register. And then I went to CASA's page, and they're not that clear on it. It's a little bit ambiguous because the whole thing is still a little bit fluid at the moment. The prices haven't really been set, and it looks like it may be $20 per pilot, not per drone. And so what I'm hoping is that if we can get a submission into CASA really hard, we can help solidify in the right direction. But I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. But what I hope we'll get across to CASA is that if you make the burden of compliance too onerous, people just will not comply, and you've lost any semblance of control. The only people who are going to register and follow your dictates are people who are never going to be part of the problem. But the marginal fringes where people could go either way, they're just going to say, no, not interested, too much of a burden, not going to have a part of it. And the thing that concerns me more than anything else, I mean, the drone tax, that's fine, you pay that, but they are effectively barring young people from entering the hobby. And the example I gave in the video I just posted was, the 7, 8, 9-year-old who wants to get a small drone or model aircraft to fly. His mother is a solo mother. She works 2 jobs. She doesn't have any interest or knowledge of drones. She's not going to go and sit the online competency test so that she can then go and supervise him while he flies his drone or his model aircraft. And there are, these days, the whole thing has changed dramatically. There may not be a club within easy traveling distance of where this kid lives, because now we've got bigger cities, and sometimes people have to drive an hour to get to a club. A 7 or 8, 9-year-old on his bicycle, he's not going to get there. So he has no supervision. He's barred from the hobby by these rules, when CASA has said the traditional hobby isn't the problem. So why are they penalising them? And it really makes me quite cross. Australia is sort of the next country in the listing. We've got Canada are doing basically the same thing. It's a bit worse in Canada, because if you want to go to Canada with your drone, you will not be allowed to fly it because you are not a Canadian citizen. And they restrict the operation of drones and model aircraft to Canadian citizens. It's like, if you're not one of us, you can't fly unless you apply in advance and get a special flight operating certificate. And that process is still not defined, just a few months out from the rules. There's no idea of what is involved in doing that, what the costs are, what the timeframes are. So basically, same with Australia though. If you go to Australia with your drone on holiday, if you don't have that competency thing and you haven't registered your drone, you're breaking the law. I mean, seriously, drones are becoming contraband of the highest order. There'll be one queue where they search you for drugs and guns, and there'll be an even bigger queue where they search you for drones when you come into a country. It's crazy.
Yeah, no.
It's just the following up of a tendency. Well, remember when I spoke about a year ago that the registration per drone was the proposed rule, and everybody here in Portugal complained about that. And one thing that we have to pay respect to the Portuguese regulators, ANAC, is that they understand these drone situation. So even just a few weeks ago, the government issued a new proposal and the head of ANAC, I think he wants to be fired, went publicly to say that the proposed regulation was just crap. But I believe that the tendency will be registration, whether by model or by pilot. In my opinion, it should be by pilot. And mandatory insurance, mandatory civil liability insurance, that will be also taken. And let's hope that some of our pay-to-fly airspace controller friends will let us fly, because that is something that is also growing up.
Well, yeah, there's a huge push, and this week there's a lot of that. There's one particular company that is part of big pushes for the U-Space CSAR thing in Europe, and they're putting their heads above the parapets to be the #1 guys. And I hope they don't. I hope they don't come through. but there we are. Because
you're meaning the Belgian guys from.
No, not I like them. I like them. No, not you. Unifly.
Unifly. It's
Unifly. Not them. I like them.
It's part of a Japanese company called Terra Drones.
That's right, yeah. And TerraDrone, actually, you say Japanese company, but they've got big offices in India. They've got offices in Australia. They've got offices in America. They're actually perhaps one of the biggest players that hardly anybody knows about at the moment.
Yes,
they're a big company, with plans all over the place.
Yes, I know that. I know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, but yeah, no. Back to the but Jonathan, you must be rubbing your hands because if all these rules and regs are coming in and people are getting into trouble, surely as a drone lawyer, respected drone lawyer, that's just money for old rope for you. You can help them out left, right, and centre.
Excellent point. I actually put together a presentation on this just yesterday. So let's talk about briefly kind of some talking points on this one topic here. How many people have actually been prosecuted by the FAA? There's actually a government accountability report. It was either government accountability or DOT. Inspector General's office. They put out a report and it broke down the overall amount of, I guess, from June the 7th to 2007 to May the 2nd, 2018. What was the overall breakdown? And they said that there was 420 compliance actions. So that could be on-the-spot corrections. Hey, knock it off. You don't need to do that. Kind of, hey, is this maybe an innocent ignorance kind of situation? Then there was 49 administrative warnings that were sent or letters of correction sent. That was 49. And then there were 49 enforcement actions that were recommended. So this is between 2007 to 2018. Of those 49 enforcement actions, there were 46 civil penalties recommended, 1 suspension of a certificate recommended, and 2 revocations of a certificate that were recommended. So I know there's been at least an emergency revocation on a commercial. There was a revocation on a student. I think also another revocation or suspension also on another commercial. This data is not super accurate because I don't think it's completely all the information is there. I've had conflicting info that has been cited in 2 different situations. I believe also Charles Rowley over at the FAA, when his presentation at the FAA symposium over about a year ago, he said that there was, I think, 72 enforcement actions that have happened. So is it 49 or is it 72? Not exactly sure. But regardless, over a 2007 to 2018 time period, that is an extremely low amount. And additionally, you have violations where the average amount might be around $1,100 to $2,200 and so that's what it was up until about 3 years ago, when the FAA had to up their the violation of the dollar amount per violation. Currently it's $1,414 per violation, and you might get 2 or more violations per incident. But the FAA, if they're smart about it, what it seems like they're doing is that they're keeping the dollar amount at an amount lower than what it's really worth to hire an attorney to get involved, right? Because if you get, no, really think about it, right? So there isn't, they don't go after a lot of people, and they're really expensive traffic tickets is kind of the best way to maybe conceptualize it. So you don't have a lot of it, and you don't have really high dollar amounts. So a lot of these are settled. They haven't gone to court. I think Motherboard about 3 years ago, obtained a lot of information on this, and I went through those 22, it was 22, 23 something cases, and a lot of them actually just settled because it was like, why fight it? Just pay the cash, sign it, settle it, you move on. So that's kind of what I've seen here in the FAA, which has an extremely large base, and then at the same time, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to go forward with this. It's because, well, who actually eyewitnessed the whole entire thing, right? It probably wasn't an FAA guy. It was some cop that stopped the whole thing. And then you got to deal with them coming in. And additionally, if you really go after them with a high dollar amount, they're going to get you're going to get an attorney involved, and you got to deal with all of that, or just go for, hey, we're going to cite you for careless and reckless. Just pay this, this $1 amount, and let's be done with it. And that just seems the overall pattern from 2007 to 2018. I'm glad you asked, Gary.
Well, it actually ties in nicely to Ian, who's been in and out of shot here, joined and unjoined, because he will be talking about data and stats and freedom of information requests. But let's just recap. I think in America, isn't there more? How many Part 107 operators are now? I've forgotten how many have you got?
It's like over 100,000 so far. Yeah, you got it. But you also have to remember that for purposes of if you can kind of segregate out of that 100,000, how many are really Part 61ers just adding on the certificate, or are they people that paid $150 to go and take it? So I suspect a lot of the 61ers, the people that already have a manned aircraft certificate that they obtain under Part 61, they have a very easy route to go about obtaining a remote pilot certificate. So that's what I mean. There wasn't a lot of effort they had to put in or dollar amount to actually go and obtain that, versus a individual who paid $150 and went from zero to all this aeronautical knowledge, right? So it seems that number may be a little bit larger than what might be the serious, real, kind of the core group of people that are really serious about doing it. I believe there's also been some data published on this that shows a really large majority, as well as my own data that I've been gathering, that a large majority of the people are primarily part-timers and stuff. You don't have too many full-time people in the drone industry. It's the majority is just part-timers on everything, actually. Yeah.
And also, I think you're seeing the numbers are beginning to flatten as they are in the UK and as they have done in Australia as well. The initial hullabaloo is over, and perhaps you say that, not so many full-timers in it, and those that are perhaps are beginning to work in-house for companies now. It's more going that way. Companies have realized, they've seen benefits. I'm not saying there's less RPAS operators, but companies have seen the benefit of data that they're getting, and they're thinking, I'll tell you what, let's bring that in-house. Let's have all the lads can do it in the IT department or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's 100,000 Part 107 operators of various colors. That less than 100 incidents or prosecutions is hardly any at all, is it really? Because that will include normal model flyers, won't it?
Oh, well, correct. Yeah, because that was commercial and recreational. Was that overall those stats that I was giving? I don't know what the breakdown was on commercial. I think when I went through the 22, only like 2 or 3 of them I could even verify that they were commercial. But that does not rule out that the rest were not commercial. It just means I could attribute to 2 or 3 that they were commercial. So there's once again, we don't have a lot of data. Why is that? One of the ways that law enforcement can actually deter future problems is that there's a lot of there's examples that are being made. And why is it that some attorney has some information but not a lot? And I can't tell you, very specific examples is this guy and that guy. Oh yeah, and you remember that guy, Gary? Oh yeah, I remember that guy. Remember that guy in the FA just slammed that? Yeah. We don't really have as many of those stories. Why don't we have those stories that are great at deterring bad actors? The FAA this isn't a high priority for them at the same time. And you look at the amount of drones flying in the sky relative to manned aviation, so
you can't say it's not a high priority. One of the excuses in the 737 MAX thing was, we've been having to deal with drones, so we didn't have a
dude. Okay, when I read that, I didn't comment on it, but I was like, dude, I was like, I was just like, are you kidding me? Anybody that read that, I think, was like, what is this guy talking about? Okay, so for instance, AVS is the overall group in the FAA that they inside it, they have, integration, I believe, also aircraft certification and also flight standards. So AFS 800 those are the guys that are taking care of the waivers on it. think certification was the 737 MAX. But so when you say like, hey, we need some more budget money to train our guys, well, what actual part of was needing to be trained? It's saying, hey, this overall group, which includes a lot of people, somebody in there needed training. Therefore, it somehow bumped out the 737 MAX guys and in the certification office and they were like not able to do it. I'm like, the certification guys do deal with some drone stuff, but they're not as much as over on the AFS 800 or AJV 115, which AJV 15 is over on ATO. It's a completely different side. So when I saw that, I was like, man, you're just like piecing together parts and just like, that sounds great, but no. And what evidence do you have? It's a great clickbait headline, which, that's news reporters for you, drone sightings surge, right? And you're like, wow, that's a great verb. Very imaginative, right? Surging drones. They're coming out of it. I mean, they're multiplying. Literally, people are dropping like flat. You pull the drone sightings data, they never go into the actual numbers. They always go after percentages, right? You never hear a number. Because if you hear a number, you'd be like 100 for the entire United States or something. You're like, this is a joke, right? And then it's like, but if you get from 50 to 100, it's like, oh my gosh, 200%. Everyone's dying. And you're like, percentages is how you hype the junk up, right? Go from 1 to 2 and everyone's like, whoa, we have insane percent. 1 to 3 sightings. Whoa, the sky is full. So, I mean, it's a clickbait headline. Anyways, I'm not opinionated about it. But
that's perfect. That's perfect. That allows me to bring Ian in because Ian did some, and I should have put a link in the thing. I'm rubbish at this. I didn't. But Ian revealed some stats about various drone things a couple of years ago. It's all very good. It was all done via freedom of information requests, and lo and behold, a newspaper in the UK today put out sort of similar thing, and the numbers were quite different, weren't they, Ian? And,
yeah,
and it was framed around one of those skies falling headlines. What was? It was concern over sharp rise in police call-outs to drone-related incidents. Sorry, after you, Ian.
Yeah, fine. There's quite a bit to go through with this story. It obviously
to disturb and has no voicing.
Oh, we can hear him. I can hear him.
I can.
Oh, Davia.
I can hear you. Carry on, Ian. Carry on.
Yeah. So it was the figures we'd actually looked at last year, and I'd just used the local police force, which is the West Yorkshire force, because obviously there's so many police forces in the UK to try and go through all that statistics. It's a major job. So kept to the West Yorkshire force, and it's still quite good because that represents over 2 million people. And we'd found last year the exact figure, because I was given each individual call, was 171. And then the newspaper today was saying there's been a huge rise in drone calls, and yet their figure was 135. So I thought, well, something's wrong here because that's a drop. So obviously, the best way to try to get to the bottom of these things is to actually find the reporter on Twitter and say, whoa, what's going on? And some of the commercial operators jumped in as well. It's just because obviously we're used to getting flack. And to be honest, the police stats are one of the worst ones anyway. They're one of the most unfair statistics to use against drone users because the vast majority of the issues there aren't even a crime taking place. They simply can't because we're getting no prosecution. So the police, one way or another, they're deciding those aren't crimes. So many of the things, if you read them, clearly aren't anyway. So it was frustrating that it was using those figures again, and then it was also the question over the numbers. So I felt a little bit bad for the reporter at the end because he unlike other reporters, or maybe just because the number of people that could jumped on Twitter, he actually got on the phone and he called Lee Ballard of Approved Drone Pilots who jumped in on the tweets as well, and actually tried to speak to him and said, "Oh no, wait a minute, I'm not trying to misrepresent things. These are figures I've got to the police." And then I said, "Yeah, can you call him because you know the West Yorkshire figures?" I said, "Yeah, fair enough. I'll have a chat with him." And I chat with him on phone for about 20 minutes, and I was just explaining as well the damage it does with the headlines and how they're presented, like the previous years, when they reported it, they put 2 years together to make it sound scarier and so on. So I had a bit of chat around it all, so he kind of understood where we were coming from and why people were jumping up and down. Because I said again, these statistics, I said even if we assume that every single one of these was a genuine crime, it is a trivial number. It is less than the police get reports of snowballs and so on. So I said, you wouldn't be doing a newspaper story on any other crime that had this lower statistics. So we kind of had to be a bit of a point of agree to disagree, but at least I got across that point. And then I chatted and I agreed to do it. I said, look, send me your freedom of information. I'll send you mine, and we could see what's gone on. And we could see that actually the police had run exactly the same query. So the query wasn't wrong. They hadn't put different words in or so on. So I thought, well, this is a bit odd. But then he's been provided with 1, 2, 3, 5 headings. So they've taken all the figures and they've consolidated it down. And I think in that process, somebody's done the maths wrong and the figures been wrong. Because when I got the overall statistics, obviously, when I've got the actual calls, I've ended up with a higher number. So we've got a bit of confusion at the moment of knowing which is right. So I've gone to the Freedom of Information Department for the police and said, look, you've done these 2 requests. Both were asking you for the same information, and you've come up with 2 different figures. So can we get to the bottom of it? So at least in future, we can both be putting through the same request. And it's less work for the police as well, because they can do 1 request and give that out to everybody. One thing I did note, though, even with looking at the figures, so at the moment, we don't really know which figures to go by. I mean, I would still think it would be similar to the set I've got, because it's a higher figure, and we've seen the call data, so there's definitely calls that's there. But either way, we may well see similar trends, but the trend actually isn't that scary. For example, even if you took the figures that were given to the newspaper, it's an 8% increase from last year to this year. Well, that's not need for hysterical. And again, we're talking percentages. In number of calls, it's 10 more. Now, come on. That's less than 1 per month for a population of over 2 million. So again, it didn't need that level of drama. And they haven't even broken it down to Bradford. So if you're Bradford paper, you should do that. And you might even find that there's actually no issue here, which I think the numbers last year, it was somewhere around about 20, or it might have been less. So it was a small, for our city, it was a small number of the overall West Yorkshire anyway. But even looking at that as well, in the previous year, which wasn't mentioned, the figure here has fallen, and it had fallen by a actually, has it? Yeah, it's kind of been up and then it's dropped down and then it's gone up again. So 2016 was actually higher than 2017, but we didn't see any headlines of drone calls have dropped. So yes, whatever way you look at it, you can be a lot fairer to the drone industry when you look at these figures and present them. As I say, this is one of the worst figures, but even when you look at it, it is not giving a particularly scary figure. So we've gone from 2016, 2017, 2018, 3 years, and the call numbers have virtually not changed. So we're not seeing some dramatic escalation in calls to the police. So it says actually we've probably maxed out a very trivial number of reports to the police. Even West Yorkshire Police said in the news story, they specifically said we do not have an issue with drones. So, what more do you need?
Yeah, and some of those reports that you found last time were things like, wasn't one of them a drone was stolen and something like that? It's not actually a flying incident, shall we say?
Yeah.
Anything with the word drone in it.
That's correct. So anything with the word unmanned aerial vehicle as a term and or drone comes out in the figures. And this is what I said to the reporter as well. I said, not only is the figure, but a lot of these aren't crimes. So I specifically said to him, I said, we've had fireworks that have been reported as drones. As you mentioned, there's drone users that have been assaulted and the drones taken off them. People that have had their credit cards cloned and then drones bought. So I said, you've got all that in the mix. I noticed in the comments someone was saying, what exactly did he say to that? I got a kind of noises of acknowledgement to the point I was making. We were still on the, we've to agree to disagree, in that he's saying, well, I've still got to put a story out about drones, but within that, it was he listened, and I think he understood, but he was still it's something we've got to report on because it's topical kind of things. But I mean, it's not the worst we've seen of all the press reports. I mean, it looked in at first because obviously the discrepancy in the figures, but hopefully we built up a bit of relationship anyway. So we're chatting to him, exchanging emails, said, well, look, if you're going to run a story in future, can we have some balance? Because the other point I made, and a few operators had actually said this, I said you can actually lose content for the newspaper because there's both hobbyists that give some photos to the newspaper, and there's even a few commercial operators. Because, you know, sometimes it'll just be a case of, well, I'll just promote my company, I'll put something in, they can put on my URL and so on. And there was actually 3 operators that said, I'm so upset by the negative stories, I'm actually thinking that I might not send them content in future. So I said, just keep that in mind, because you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Nobody wins out of this.
Yeah, and that it's well, go ahead.
Some breaking news.
Yeah,
just a few hours ago in New York City, in Brooklyn, there was a funeral procession for a well-known rabbi, and a cop suffered minor injuries from an errant drone. There was a drone that came out of the sky and hit a police officer. And you might think, oh, gee, that's terrible, isn't it? And apparently the officer was taken off to hospital, minor injuries, but it's taken off to hospital. But if you're worried about drones, you should also know that during that procession, a hearse ran over the leg of an officer working crowd control. So don't worry about the drones. You get minor injuries, but watch out for the dead people. They're going to run over your leg.
So there you go. It's all, well, thank you very much.
Since we're talking about statistics, also, I just did a quick the FAA's wildlife database search in Florida between January 1st, 2014 till April 1st, 2019. There was a total of 22 collisions between a turtle and an aircraft. So just throwing everything into proportion.
Yeah, well, it's proportion and numbers are nonsense, isn't it? And as you've correctly said, you know, an increase from 1 to 2 is huge if you take the numbers out and just put a percentage in there, or 1 to 3. So you're bob on right there, and it's grand that Ian had done the work, had done the footwork before. If nobody had done the footwork before, we wouldn't have been able to say, well, actually, in this UK instance case, and perhaps that's a little bit more. What as an industry, the great royal we I'm going to use now is we should be holding people to task for what they say about the industry. Ian's very good at doing that. And then the task that's I'm going to try and lead into is the one that we all blame Bruce for, and that's the fantastic Rod Vaughan incident in New Zealand, where I don't know if you'll remember, where the guy was flying a microlight and a drone went through the windscreen, and luckily he survived the forced landing and was able to tell the world how evil drones were. Perhaps I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I, Bruce? That's how it went, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. He admitted, I didn't see a drone, but it was almost certainly a drone that crashed into my aeroplane and brought it to the ground. But just simple stuff that any reporter worth the title reporter should have done to investigate the background on that story would have resulted in a great deal more skepticism being levied. But this guy was a veteran reporter, and he's got friends in the media. He knows everybody. Everyone respects him. So it must be true because that's what he said. And it shows the very low threshold of proof required whenever a drone does something bad. Or, you know, if a pilot with his epaulet says, I saw a drone, you know, 5 miles away off my port wing and it hovered there for 35 seconds at 27,000 feet. He's a pilot. He must be right. And so the burden of proof is so very low because I think people, or the media certainly want these stories because that's money in the bank. And people just like to be titillated by, you know, the sort of the fear, ooh, drones, evil. But this is permeated right through to the politicians who are now coming up and forcing the regulators to introduce all these draconian, stupid rules because the politicians' perceptions of the risk is flawed. And when you go to the regulators, whether you go to CASA in America, in Australia, or CAA in New Zealand, and say, can we please see the risk assessment on which this regulatory framework is based? Their response is, we don't have one. So how can you create sensible, reasonable, balanced regulations if you haven't got a risk assessment? It's lunacy. Nowhere else in the world, I think, or any other aspect of human engagement could you do that. Jonathan, what do you think? Is it reasonable to produce a regulatory framework?
You bring up an excellent point. I was actually going to jump in on that one point there. The Department of Transportation's Inspector General's office, was it a couple months ago? They actually published a report, and that was one of their findings, was that the data for these drone sightings incidents and is just bad, and so you can't overall put together a proper safety risk assessment because the data is bad. Therefore, any risk assessment is corrupted as well. In regards to actually creating regulations or anything going forward. And so the DOT, actually, IG's office, pointed that out as well. So you're onto it. Other people are onto it. The FAA got caught with bad data. They haven't really properly cleaned all their data. I mean, not only is maybe that's an issue over in Europe with this drone sightings data, but the FAA has done the same exact thing. You have the intentional disclosures of these drone sightings, from 1 year over to another. I mean, 1 year over to another, or maybe 1 month over to another, that typically happen in the fall. When you graph out all the drone sightings, the data that I got for over about 4 year period or so, and graphed it out, it's just cyclical with the warmth of the environment, right? People fly when it's warm out. They don't fly when it's cold out. So if you live in like Southern California, Southern Florida, then you're going to be flying 24/7 versus, Minnesota and Maine and Alaska, right? Nobody flies. So there's a proportionality to that. And they intentionally do it at the very back end, like let's say September, because that's when things start getting cold here in the United States, right? And so that's at the very top part of the peak. You're kind of getting the August, September numbers. And then you're saying, hey, look at the trend we're doing. But if you actually graph it out, you can start seeing that the stuff drops right after that. You never see any news announcements regarding drone sightings, let's say in February, right? There's never like the drone sightings, are like an endangered species. We need to have federal funding to keep these people alive and have preserves. We call them AMA fields or something. I don't know. And so you never see that. It's always on the other side. And even the FAA, and one of their news announcements, if you took the math and you graphed it out, you're like, your graph did not actually, your prediction did not actually make any sense. So either one, you don't know how to do math, you weren't critically thinking, or maybe you were intentionally misstating the facts because it fit an overall narrative that you wanted to overregulate an area and you wanted to use this as a justification for your lack of inactivity. And you're like, whoops, we got caught, and we need to figure out how to get out of this whole situation we're in. So let's create a false scenario and get around following the law. And they found out that's not a good idea with the Taylor case. But anyways,
yeah, well, it's well, but we've got to start holding these people. So Rod, I mean, Bruce didn't unpack it, but hopefully he'll unpack the technicalities of it better than I will, because he'll know it better than I will. But the windscreen was UV. It wasn't a UAV. It was a UV. It was ultraviolet. Did the windscreen in, and thankfully there was a great investigation done by New Zealand CAA. They did it properly, and they said, no, it wasn't a drone, Mr. Vaughan. It was this. And somebody did reach out to me via email back last May and said, hey, did you know that Aero Club actually had a new windscreen on order? so the clues were all there. And when we look at it, or when I looked at that, and you're a commercial pilot as well, Jonathan, but I thought it's very strange. You never see many incident reports where in the incident reports it says for the pilot hours, 350 hours approximately, and then for the last 30, 90, and 12 months, unknown. That to me, I mean, what does that, without leading you by the nose, but what does that suggest to you, Jonathan, Your Honor?
Sounds fishy.
Yeah, it sounds to me like he hasn't got a properly filled out logbook.
Well, right? Like, I don't know. It was a drone that got me. Guys, we need to focus on what's important here. The drone got me. Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
I don't know.
right.
Maybe I don't know.
That's what it is. I always forget you're useless as a guest because you can't offer any advice because it's always construed as legal advice. I'd forgotten that.
Correct.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that. Yeah, but it struck me that, to have unknown in your 12, every pilot knows what hours he's done. Hours on type, unknown, 350 hours approx. So there's more to this than meets the eye. And hopefully, I don't know, Bruce, was just like a preliminary report, or is that it done and dusted?
I think that's it done and dusted. There was no serious injury, and the only damage was to the plane. So I don't think they'll bother. They're pretty busy people at CAA. They've got other things to do. They've got to figure out why so many people are flying so low that they're killing themselves, and despite the fact that it's supposed to be above 500 feet.
Well, there's that as well, isn't there? But we've got to hold. Ian's very good at holding people's feet to the fire via Twitter if he sees something. But as an industry, we can't just have Ian or me being over. I deliberately made a ranty anti-general aviation post because it does upset people. Yeah, Nicholas quiet. We'll let him in a minute. We have lots of questions from him in a minute. But we need to be changing the narrative, having a 100-year view of how airspace is going to be, not a view that just encompasses what our pop-up VC-funded company wants to try and sell the industry in the next 2 years. We've got to have a better picture of all this, and it's not happening fast enough to my liking. Rant ends. Someone take over. Someone help. I've run out of rant. Let's make that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But you're right. We do need some dramatic changes to the way the airspace is managed. We can't just say it's for airplanes. That's the big problem we've got. And as I've said continuously, the drone industry won't have matured until such time as we see GA having to change its operations to accommodate the growing drone industry. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen.
Well, that's what we haven't spoken. Well, we sort of briefed about the Australian things, but that is, I think there's quite a good chance that it is Google and Co. Having a bit of a lean on the regulator over there because they do want that drone delivery airspace, and we'll be the easy ones to get out the way, as it were, be we model aircraft flyers or RPA flyers, and the harder ones to get out of the way will be GA. But you watch, I bet they push them up out of the way as well. Ranting as well. Nicola, let's ask Nicola. Nicola, have you found that plane?
No, I haven't. Not yet, at least.
Is there still snow up on the mountain?
Yeah. There will be at least until the middle of next month.
Very
so, good. Yeah. I still have time to prepare a few more planes to go up there, including the Ranger 2400, which finally flew over the weekend. And yeah.
Wind all the way back to Blue Flyer's earlier comments. Have you got an opinion? I've forgotten the board he says now of the 405 or the 722 board for INAV, he says, but of course we'll put Ardupilot on. It would be better, Blue Flyer. But anyway, the 405 or 722. What's your choice there, Nicola?
Well, I haven't used an F7 yet, but as far as I've read, heard, etc., if there's a compatible firmware for the F7, perhaps probably go for that, because as far as I know, it has more outputs, inputs, serial ports, whatever. It's just more. You can get more functionality out of it. For what I use and for how I fly, for how I equip my planes, at least for the time being, the Omnibus F4 Pro is pretty sufficient because I don't really use anything else than the servos, a mode switch, and that's about as far as I go. About inputs, outputs, a GPS. I don't use an airspeed sensor. I don't use a compass, and everything works. Keep it simple. If I wanted to connect like more peripherals to something and have more outputs, I'd definitely go for one of the Matek Wing controllers, perhaps the 4, not the 05, the other one, the bigger size. And maybe an F7 controller. That's also a good option, as long as you can find the compatible firmware for it.
Okay, and you're being asked, you have many mapping capable planes. Do you see yourself actually using one as a mapper, putting down a down-facing camera to survey the loss?
I've been thinking for a while now that this is pretty funny. Indeed, I do have quite a lot of mapping planes, and I've never used one to do any mapping because that's, I don't know, at some point, somehow I think that's kind of useless for,
sorry.
What am I going to map?
Well, you're going to look for a white foam plane on top of a mountain.
on top of white snow. Yeah. Well, the thing is, using anything as mapping at this point would require me drilling a hole into the bottom of the plane. And if that's going to be a one-off event, I'm really not sure if I really want to do that. Having said that, I have thought about like mounting a camera on one of the planes facing straight down and doing flybys up there, because the other day I even flew the Ranger 2400 with a 10 amp 4S battery, and even with that beat up battery that I don't even know how old it is, it still flew for 55 minutes. I had to land because I had to leave, and battery cells was still at 3.75 per cell. So that's, just a tad below storage voltage, and that's after an hour of flight, and that included auto tuning, some altitude gains, emission, etc. You can do a lot in an hour.
You can, and Blue Flies, he's talking from the History Channel here. Buy a cheap Canon point and shoot, no THDK on it, and set to interval photos. It's a History Channel. It is. Are you running a historic flight of drone photography over there, Blue Flyer? But yeah, that's exactly what I do as well. That is exactly how we always do it. In fact, just tape it to the underside of the wing. It'll be all right. No need to drill a hole. Just tape it on. It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
I guess.
What could go?
Probably.
Chris has said that on. Chris has said that in the comments as well. Just tape it on. Just tape
Actually,
it on.
one way I can do this would be to like simulate the conditions of the previous flight, let the plane go into fail-safe right there, but have a beacon in it, and then just follow the trail. Have it crash in exactly the same way.
Well, if you crash enough of them in the same spot, they'll then become much easier to find.
Exactly.
But I think, didn't you think it might have been blown off the mountain? Wasn't that the issue?
What?
Didn't you think it might have been blown off the mountain because you had some stormy weather after the crash?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to wait for a storm to try that.
Yes, then put some in the same direction of storm after that. Yeah, 100 models and you'll find your original one. Shame, man. So what else is on your workbench there? What else is coming?
Well, the Hobson F-22 Jet, which is not around here right now. It's downstairs in the car. It's an interesting little thing, and definitely not for beginners. I mean, I had planned for this to be flown by somebody with absolutely no experience in these things, because, it promised a return to home, GPS, safety, whatever, stabilized flight. Even with that stabilization, that thing is a handful. Like, you'd buy this if you're an expert and you want to challenge your skills. Like, literally, this thing is it's pretty incredible to try and keep it in the air, keep it flying, really. But you'll see, reviews gonna come out pretty soon, and a few more things are coming. I've got one plane for beginner series videos because a lot of people have been asking for that, and I've also got one more coming still en route. And as far as I know, I'm waiting for like 4 or 5 planes from Volantex, some new ones, and some in regulation.
Some in regulation? What does that mean?
250 grams with GPS functionality.
Aircraft or multi-rotors?
Aircraft.
Okay.
Come on. Multi-rotors.
I know. Bruce flies them. I know. Yeah, we ain't got to worry about them. I know. So, are they from Volantex or from somebody else?
Yeah.
Volantex.
Yeah.
And do you think they've seen the light and they're building to that point, or is it just coincidental?
I haven't asked why they're doing that. I saw somebody else release something. I'm trying to remember right now what that was. That was under 250 grams. It was a nice size, and it had those same functions like a GPS return to home. Some of them even have digital video connections, not analog. It's Wi-Fi of some sort. So, yeah. But, things, I think, when regulations really come into full swing, I think it will be a pretty weird picture in the hobby. I mean, under 250 grams, it will be okay, but a lot of people will feel, frustrated, claustrophobic, perhaps, because there's only so much you can do with 250 grams, and then everything else will be industrial.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I think the capabilities will start marching upwards, and we'll all
and they'll drop the entry the entry restrictions 200 grams.
Yeah. Well, no, they'll take it. Well, Australia's already 100 grams, isn't it? They'll take it down to naught. They
have a long way to go if they want to go. For instance, 250 grams. It's okay, even for professional flights. Just before the podcast, I was looking at that little helicopter from Fleer. That was the Norwegian one. That was 16 grams. So, come on. We have a long way to go from 250 up to 16. And I'm sure that we can get some paper.
Okay, that is just a pointless race with the legislation. I mean, to what end? At some point, commercial. Yeah, at some point they're gonna kill the hobby.
It's a commercial helicopter.
Yeah, I know, but that's the problem. At some point, they're just gonna kill the hobby completely.
But you say it's a commercial helicopter. It's not really a commercial helicopter. It's in the way that we might understand it, often a mapping mission. It's a mirror on a stick, but very expensive, because that's what soldiers have used.
And that 2 kilometers. And that 2 kilometers. So
yes, I know that's what it says in the book. But if you speak to guys that operate them in the field,
the new version, the one that I think there are 3 versions, and the second version would do almost 1 kilometer, and the new version that was released somewhere in November has advertised range of 3 kilometers, swappable cameras, swappable batteries.
Oh, okay.
And 30 grams. So they doubled the weight, and it still flies 25 minutes. So they've got something in that.
I've got to butt in because Jonathan's saying in our comments that he's got to go. He's apparently a lawyer. Thanks very much, Jonathan. Love your input. And I am going to release that video. I don't care if you hate it or not.
Oh, okay.
All right, mate. Look after yourself. We'll speak to you again soon. Great course.
All right. Adios. Bye.
Cheers, man. Bye-bye. Is he gone yet? He's not gone yet. Yeah, we can talk about him now. There we go. That's good. Well, that's better.
But the thing I like about 250 grams is that it sets a new challenge. I mean, the hobby has been a bit lacking in challenges recently, I think. And now with 250 grams, we're going to see what can we do with this particular restriction. And I hear from a reliable source that someone around here is doing 16-kilometer flights with a sub 250 gram fixed wing FPV model. I've no idea who it is, but we'll probably see what happens eventually. And that's the kind of thing we're looking at. As the technology ramps up and marches on, the things that we can only do or think of doing with large models today will become commonplace tomorrow. So it'll be really interesting to see how the regulators respond to that. Is this about safety or is it about control and restriction? Because if we see these sub 250 machines doing long-range BVLOS stuff and having endurances of an hour, will we suddenly find that, oh, it's only safe to fly sub 100 gram models after that? I don't know. What do you reckon?
Okay, so this guy is 300 grams, and if the it's a commercial off-the-shelf product. So if you want to go lighter, the manufacturers would only have to get a lighter battery here. So, and will be under the 250 grams scale. So I really don't know.
I think we all know it's about control and not safety.
I think the problem is safety, but not the safety that we usually speak here. Is the authorities don't want to see the Venezuela incident being played in Europe. And that is a huge safety concern about this, because it's very easy to pick up a drone and do nasty stuff, and they don't want that. And we've seen that done with cars, trucks, and all that, and they want to cut their losses as soon as possible.
Well, they should stop pissing people off.
Well, my opinion stands. It's control. Whether some people are tricked into actually really thinking they're doing it for the safety, but in fact, the larger agenda is control, and that's it.
Yeah.
Nothing can convince me otherwise. Sadly, this is how the world works.
Blue Fly saying, let's not kill ourselves into thinking they've actually done research to come up with this 250 gram. They have, haven't they? But we never quite get it right as to who did it. They have. That has been done. I say the Danish, and somebody else says something else.
Yeah.
But some research has been done. And yeah. But
I proved it with the crash test dummy video. I did the research. I proved it.
You did,
yes.
You did. You did bravely put yourself forward there, but I still maintain that you did a really poor job of hitting yourself. And if we were all to fly out there and you were all to make us one, I reckon we get a lot more hits in, a lot faster.
Well, I tell you what, I've always wanted to do it, an extra long-range FPV where I would set up a model and would use the internet to have someone flying it at the other end. So we should do that, and then everyone can have a go flying into me, and then they'll all be arrested for flying beyond visual line of sight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yes, Blue Flyer said you did a great video on that. Look, we've gone over the hour. And Ian's fallen asleep in his shed there in the spring.
It's hypothermia, isn't it?
It shouldn't be now. It's spring. I've been seeing
Ian is getting ready to sail off from Europe now.
Oh. All right. I'll be slightly political. But did you see that there was that we've spoken about the prospects of terror attacks by drone? But there was a fellows that set up something on the railway to look like there was a signalling issue with trains, and the only reason their attack today didn't work was because EU regulations changed the way the signals worked. So their attack, their terror attack, didn't work because of EU regulations. But anyway,
and I love D-drone, because apparently people are telling me that just about all my videos now have a D-drone ad at the beginning of them.
Oh my God. You saw the clip I sent you from Google.
Yeah, that's excellent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, if that ad does run on top of your videos, or if anyone is watching a YouTube video and that advert does pop up, then continue watching it. Watch it all the way through. So please,
click on it.
Yeah, even click on it. Yeah, watch and click on that video. That'll be just the ticket. Yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, we Bruce has got a great rant video about it. It's a video that's been popping up. They were going to come and join us. Was it last week or the week before?
Last week.
But they didn't, and they won't now. That's for sure.
I think it's wrong that we think of that of them. I think if they're want to play fair and are with good intentions on this, they won't have any problems coming up.
Exactly. I was hoping they would, because it's not the product that I'm objecting to, it's just the marketing. And maybe they've got a great product and they can convince us that we should all have one, and more power to them. But I just think that they need to review the way they're marketing it.
Oh, come on. You know how marketing BS works. Not taking into account the blockchains and the cloud-based systems.
It's funny, pull up a sandbag, but having had SUS News for more than 10 years now, when the established companies change their marketing teams and then the company reintroduces itself, and I would have known the previous marketer for years and knew how they operated. It's very interesting to watch them change tack and come out with new old ideas and this, that, and the other. It's
It's called respinning.
Respinning, or rewinding. Oh no, that would be going backwards, wouldn't it? Yeah. No, it's very interesting watching the spin and change. But yeah, I think DJI may end up regressing that certain amount of spin. And I did see, actually, I didn't put it in our comments. Did you see that there was a company? I put them in. They've been in the SUS News. I've read that. They bought out another solution, but they implicitly said it was for knocking out what's that DJI thing? OcuSync? Is that what it's the DJI was?
Yeah, OcuSync.
Yeah.
OcuSync.
Yeah. It's deliberately for knocking that out. I thought that was very, very specific. I've got to go through here. I can't find it now. It was in SUS News. And there's another company that came.
So it's incompatible with my drone. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well,
Come
yes.
on,
So
you're 10% of the market. Forget it. We are all dead. We are 10% of the market. The DJI overlords take over us.
There you go. Look, it's well past the hour. Before I go, as I normally do, did anyone else see anything else that they wish to rant about right now?
Well, it's something that we've spoken about last week. It was this last weekend was the Ardupilot Conference. We've managed to put some of the talks online quite fast, even considering the download of 300 gigabytes of video across the world. So we managed to get that thing online quite fast. And sorry for those that have seen it so far, but yes, I'm revising the videos, because one thing was to put them up as soon as possible, and now cleaning up.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, and there are some very, very specific and very interesting topics. For me, the top one was from Paul Risenborough, the owner of the extended Kalman filter, the EKF, which brings so much pain to so many. And he went for 1 hour and 20 minutes going over how to look at the EKF logs. That is fantastic. There's also a few other talks from Trich, and I will also point the one that is deep in my heart, which is the one from the upcoming Lua scripting inside Ardupilot. That might be, in my humble opinion, is the greatest game changer we'll have very soon. That, combined with the new F7 and H7 CPUs that are starting to appear. I believe almost every major manufacturer has F7s. I think I showed you last week the one from MRO, the MRO 2.1 with the 777.
Just rewind a little bit. Louis, explain what the importance of the Lua script is.
Okay, what can we do with Lua scripting? It's basically the same you do these days with a Taranis radio. You can read variables from the system and take actions. Imagine a mission and you want to do something very specific. You don't have to plan ahead all the mission. You can go and say, you have to do this, but if that happens, you do that. So the drone will start taking better decisions that don't have to be pre-programmed. So for those used to Ardupilot, you can plan missions. We usually is waypoint, 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 but now you can do actions when you do those waypoints. Those actions have variables. For instance, if it's too windy, skip one waypoint, go to the other. All the goodies from Ardupilot available to the Lua scripting, and so it's a script. If the script doesn't work, the vehicle will continue to fly as usual. So it's perhaps the biggest, in my opinion, again, the biggest game changer for Ardupilot, and people have to surpass some hurdles now because to get it running. So it's a compilation option that you have to specifically enable. But Michael Dubreuil did a wonderful talk about that, and that is already available at the Ardupilot channel.
It's the way we're thinking of how we're using these autopilots is constantly evolving, isn't it? But this is or no, there's little incremental bits. There's been big jumps and little incremental bits, but I think you're right. I think this is the next jump point where we go to another.
Now, one of the options is that you could do part of this using companion computers. So it is very common to people to put a Raspberry Pi, an Android, NVIDIA, whatever, attached and sending orders. But having the flight controller do that and have a very easy language. Come on, everybody that has done some programming can do a Lua script. And there's lots of resources about Lua scripting, not only because of OpenTX, but some of the plugins designed for some Adobe products have also Lua scripting. So it's a quite well-known language. And Michael is leading the effort of putting that together and has been very careful on how things will work. So lots of fail-safes, too much, in my opinion, but Michael likes to have lots of fail-safes, and this talk is very, very interesting. He did some examples during the conference, so it's very promising what is on the pipeline.
And we're just in the comments, Blue Fly is asking about waypoint missions. I don't know the F405.
Yes, it can do F405. Yes, the 722 won't run Ardupilot because it doesn't have enough flash storage.
Does can the 405 run missions? Does it have an SD card?
Yes.
It can run missions. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
It's full. The F405, the Matec wing, F405 wing, I think it's the right name of it. It's a full F4 CPU. Although some might argue that an F4 these days is good enough, I will recall the sapient words of one of my previous bosses when he said, no one will ever use more than 640K on a computer. So, yes, welcome to the F7 CPUs. Welcome to the H7 CPUs. It brings a brand new prospect for Ardupilot.
And as you say,
so does that mean do I have to upgrade my KK board?
Yes, you do, Bruce. You have to add at least 2 more Ks.
Ian, were you going to jump in there somewhere? Looked like you were.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the Lua scripter being mentioned probably a year ago, and I think although the word game changer is used far too often about things, I think in this case it's genuinely a fair description. The idea that, you know, people that aren't C programmers, such like, can actually start adding functionality to their drones, and then the very fact that people can actually create, smart shots or whatever, and share them with other people, and then, I think that could really open up. In fact, it's almost a little bit exciting on that, the fact that you can actually make changes and that people can share those changes. And I'm hoping enough people get involved in that, and then we might come up with some creative ideas people haven't thought of, or to make things just a lot easier than potentially they are now. And I like the fact as well that you're isolating it from the flight controller code, so that if something does go wrong with your script, you're not necessarily going to take it out of the sky, because you've got that the overall flight code is isolated from that.
Yes, there's a good example that from time to time someone comes up to GitHub and does a request. Oh, I need a new flight mode that does this, and that. I believe, I am very, very honest, I believe that we'll have to start eliminating flight modes from Ardupilot, because we have, I don't know how many, but 20? Will it be 20? But with the scripting, you can create your own flight modes. So it's like I said before, and it is already running, Ian. If you want, go and see Michael Dubra talk on the Ardupilot channel. He shares the secret, which is not a big secret, of the compilation switch that you have to do to enable scripting, and you can start doing some Lua scripting. By the way, Michael even advises the best book to study for scripting.
Yeah, it's a change, and that and companion computer thinking is the next sort of change where things are going. I think we should have called them co-pilots. I don't think we should have called them companion computers. But I think if you get that mindset, one does the flying and the other does whatever the commercial work is you need doing, and then they both go off down the pub afterwards once they've landed. You've got to get that sort of thinking going there. Anyway,
is it true that Boeing have given up on their MAX 8 flight system and they're going to put Ardupilot in it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sure. But Ardupilot does not operate manned vehicles. So, Bruce, no way for you.
Neither does Boeing at the moment.
I thought you should have said, Louis, no, the Ardupilot project is insisting on more sensors. They won't do it because there's not enough sensors on the thing. Yeah,
no, we have lots of sensors now. Come on. We've finally opened up the most weighted sensor of all. Whatever sensor you want, but just connect it through CAN bus. Yes. So CAN bus is starting to become a very good reality. One of the original guys from Ardupilot, Jani Irvinen, our Finnish blonde god from that is in Thailand, has announced a lot of new small UAV CAN adapters for existing sensors, for instance, for GPSs and all that, and he's already selling them, and it's a one wire, so you can get a lot of sensors and only one wire, so no more rat's nest of cabling all over. Oh, sorry, I have this one. No more cabling for your flight controller. So just go and have one wire run through all the sensors.
Let's see if I can beat
given
that.
CAN bus comes from an automotive background, are we going to see Ardudriver fairly soon then?
Come on, we already have Ardudriver.
It's already on tractors via the tractor port, whatever that connection's called. It's already there, mate. It's already there.
You're You're renting too much and not paying attention to Ardupilot rules. We have to convert you to Ardupilots.
And on that note, yeah, look, we better go. It's 23 minutes past. I can hear the dog. Tesla runs Argy over. That's right. You got it, Blue Flag. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Dear viewers, wherever you are, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of the week. Be safe wherever you might be. Enjoy your flying before we can't. And thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll see you again next week, 2100 GMT. Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Bye.